got an interesting question. They asked, what is it like to be cancelled? And Skip, if I may call you that, definitely not your name because you are not a 20s shipwreck explorer, but nonetheless, you are as courageous for daring to put a comment down on the internet. These days, at least, that's our war. I do not have the same experience as everybody else, despite being cancelled more than any other Australian internet personality. And I think that the reason for that is because I got in the game for skiing, baby. Whereas I think that the average celebrity, or the average person, therefore, because cancel culture is kind of just, it's run rampant now. And I know that there's going to be a bunch of people saying, yes, there is. Yes, there is. It is just mass online shaming. It's just that before there was a teeny monopoly on who could be shamed because, as the person pointed out, say something like a current affair existed and they would only go for dodgy plumbers and they couldn't ever express that, my business, just because I ripped off 700 people with dementia and got them to recharge for a $200,000 pipe twice in a row. I'm not the monster here. A current affair is. And they made me feel bad. That's much worse. But now you do, because you do get their Facebook posts of them going, this is the fake news. They cut out that I've got a mad Ferrari. Can you believe that shit? And yes, as a result of that, it just wasn't as prevalent. But yes, people did get cancelled all the time. I mean, that's the story of politicians all throughout history. It's just when the press turns on them. And so, having known that, and a lot of my heroes being Labor politicians like Jack Lang, as he told Paul Keating once, you are nobody unless you have a well-stocked list of enemies. And that is what I want you to focus on when you get, if you ever do get cancelled. You look at the people who are cancelling you, and every time you look at them, you think, okay, that is not, to use marketing slang about the internet, my tribe. They are a bunch of pink-haired fuckwits that obviously have no friends and have replaced social interaction with being anxious in a room by themselves. So their life seems perfect, doesn't it? And all of their little... This is the other thing as well. When you start realizing how unoriginal everybody's call is, that they usually just get one quote that was obviously usually taken by the press to become that one quote that they just go da, 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 amongst themselves. What are they doing there? They are justifying the fact that they didn't like you emotionally to begin with because they reminded you of someone from high school that they didn't get on with then, and so life just keeps extending out further like that. So when you look at the people that always cancel me, who are they? They're just fuckwit blue checks, which were a bunch of private school nerds. Obviously, though, I'm not going to get on with them, nor do I want to please those people. If I did want to please those people, I'd be writing plays for the Sydney Theatre Company talking about how fucking awful I am for daring to exist. Sorry about that. Just the most diverse cast imaginable for the sake of diversity, just, fucking up something, just being like, let's make it Othello this time, but Othello is white and everyone black. Oh my God, who should it be? Right? Like, I would be doing that kind of stuff to do that, but because I don't do that, they need justifications as to why they don't like me. My justifications, I feel, are a lot more based in the fact that they are just the toadies of the elite class that weren't talented enough to become CEOs, and as a result of that, they just write about how great the CEOs are and chastise anybody who works for the Populare. And so, when I see these people cancelling me, I'm like, good. That is exactly what should be happening. The only time ever that I am ever sad about someone cancelling me is when you... But that's the whole thing. It's like, this never actually happens. Even when somebody writes something, you see these phrases over and over again. This is not it. This is not it. This is not it. All of them unthinking drones. The same one, I suppose, is disappointed. Disappointed. They're always just, people that pay attention to that American Twitch stream political debaters. They always just have the same phrases that they obviously picked up from that little nerdy circle that have become this mega nexus, I suppose, like Joe Rogan's friends, but on a more sad basement level. And I am not fazed by those people doing that. It's in fact, whenever I see anybody en masse trying to just like pile on, every time I look at them, I think mission accomplished. I think mission accomplished because I have made those people's lives worse. I have affected them in a negative way, right? And that's what I set out to do. I set out to destroy what they had built and build something that works in the interest of the average Australian. The real Australians. But seriously though, like honestly, I want that. Because when I go to my shows, and this is the other thing as well, when I go to my stand-up shows and I see, say, who the ABC props up in their stand-up shows, and I went to a couple of their shows, and this was another moment of realization for me when I went to it and I realized, oh, I know the reason that they are the way they are, and it's because they're massive losers that are self-absorbed and have a victim complex. Like, it's very, very obvious when you're there. And then everybody that's in there, obviously, they're from Fitzroy. Yeah? They're from the wankiest Adam Bant seat imaginable. They're all those kind of people that just nervously dart at each other all the time because everybody in that little sphere is a beta and they're all just trying to see who's the alpha out of those betas. I really do think what that little nervous exchange is when they walk past each other of, this guy couldn't beat me up, but I couldn't beat him up either. Don't you think? Like when you're in the western suburbs and you just walk past a Maori, you're like, yep, how you doing, sir? And it's just kind of, then he's just like, is he going back? Because he knows that if it come down to it, he could clobber your head in with his fist. And so there's a natural ascendancy there, and that just doesn't exist in these little skinny, borderline anorexic, because of how small the portions are at their restaurant, inner city places. But those are the people that I want maddened. So it's obviously magnified, and this is what I always remember. And so, like the same thing with when Yours and Ours cancelled me. It was just unfortunate that Wollongong is under the grips of those hipsters. They all just moved down there because they're like, fuck, I can't afford rent in Newtown anymore. And so they went down to where they could afford rent and then turned that into Newtown, which is really unfortunate because it used to be a steel mill central and it didn't turn into that same weird hybrid that Newcastle did of becoming, I suppose, hipsters if they were addicted to meth. It just became hipsters and people that still work at the port. That was Newcastle and the steel mill, I suppose. My point is that when I went to those shows, I looked at the people there and I was just like, I'm so glad that these people don't come to my shows. And in fact, there was a point back in the day when I used to get favourable coverage from, say, your pedestrians and your junkies and whatnot, and the people that came, I despised. They were those people. And I honestly didn't really know that they existed. I had some interactions with them, but because I was sort of in that world but despised it and spent a lot of time by myself honing a craft instead of just sitting around doing coke with a bunch of other fuckwits like they do, I didn't really understand how pervasive the culture was. I used to just go there, feel like I'm uncomfortable, and then leave and think, oh, it's probably because I'm not cool. But then you just realize that they're the real losers, guys. Make sure that you like and subscribe if you get it, okay? Say no to drugs. But it is true, they are. They are losers. So when those people started to shift away because it was, what? Something against my worldview that's been very curated from my North Shore upbringing that I've moved away from because they're not as smug about believing in climate change as I am, so I'm going to move down here. It's a very distinct type of person that usually does the cancelling. And the reason is because they cannot accept, because they have been so coddled in two environments, the class that they grew up in, which is the elite class, and then, as I'm always pointing out, they're moving into the inner city because, like Marie Antoinette, they find the idea of poverty romantic. They're not actually poor. They can always go back to mummy and daddy. And in fact, mummy and daddy died because they were also drug addicts fairly early on. And so they all have their little fucking house in the Blue Mountains that they can retire to. They all have multiple properties usually that are just... So all they have to do is just wait until their parents die and then, oh, it's me, I'm going to live off the rent and continue taking drugs. Hereditary stuff, right? Yes, again, I'm not trying to appease those people, but because they have nothing to do with their lives like the average person does, where they are working constantly like teachers and tradies. They don't get involved in that, and they are much better people because they interact with the real world. And usually, if you're a teacher, you interact with a bunch of other people that are from different backgrounds to your own. And so you understand that there are other people in the world that exist. The reason that this cancel culture is so prevalent is because it's only fuckwits that live inside a very tiny bubble where they are constantly posturing. Their version of the "I could beat you up, bro" is who's the most pure within that bubble. And so in that bubble, they're constantly jockeying for it. And as a result of that, they have zero tolerance for anybody outside of that dares think differently. And so they have a very inbred worldview, and so they're extremely nasty and reject anything that pertains inside that bubble. Coincidentally, I just watched the Pauline Hanson animation, and I've got to say, that was awesome. Go, Pauline. Go, you go. Look, I'm starting to see why Mark Latham switched over. And here we go. There's going to be a bunch of those. "Oh, a friendly blooded Nick Mark Latham." That's another classic that they have. Because again, they don't think, because they're in that tiny little bubble. They have no curiosity whatsoever. And that's what I'm saying, is that only people that have zero curiosity, Puritans, I suppose is the best way to describe it. Puritans, who obviously, ironically, are the worst people in society, but they're trying to come up with these really abstract morals that exist within their own hierarchy and who serves them the best. Those people are the only ones doing the cancelling. I honestly think that the average person, this is the other thing that you have to remember every time there's a onslaught of negative tweets. You have to understand that for every one tweet that you're getting of that, there's probably 1,000 people watching it thinking, "Fuck, I'm glad I'm not that guy." I do it. I wish I could do it to the other internet people. I've only got a few numbers, but every now and then when the other internet folk that I know are getting cancelled, you always just send them the "Are you okay?" message. But really, it's out of reciprocation, I suppose, because I think we all understand the game. But I would say that I have particularly thick skin because I understood that that was the game that I got in. Every time that I'm ever cancelled, I know there's something that sparks inside me, and I think that this might just be a unique experience just to me, where I think, oh boy, this means I get to make another video slamming the fuck out of these people and cancelling them. Truly cancelling them as well, because this is what you need to understand, is that it only exists within those cultures. And I swear to God, what Friendly Geordies represents is the average Australian. The average Australian wants to watch Jonah from Tonga without getting shamed and wants public hospitals. And no one else in the press services that reality, because they are all from aristocratic backgrounds, and like all throughout history, they have these bizarre fetishized morals, because the basics of life, the bread and butter issues, are completely, like, so far removed from their reality. They've never had to think even things like, where is my rent coming from? That has never entered their reality. And so they sit there thinking about, who am I oppressed, and all that kind of shit. Well, they do at the moment, but before it might have just been like, let's discuss the concept of liberty. It just depends what it is, the flavour of the month. Now, that's what I think about getting cancelled, is that every time I am getting cancelled, the first thing that I think is time to rain hell. It is when I feel most alive. And in fact, because of all the law stuff, I've had to rein it back a bit, and I felt dead inside as a result. Because I love being petty. I really, really like thinking about, because this is the other thing, every time you're ever getting cancelled, obviously anyone who ever gets cancelled, it's always for very stupid reasons, and it's so easy to pick apart. And I like sitting there thinking about it, picking it apart, being like, this will fucking ruin your day, you little cunt. You know? That's my response to it, is that I see it as an opportunity to direct the culture war in a better place. Now, obviously, you might not be in that same area, but I think that those are the two things that I understand, is that regardless, the people that usually use the phrase bubble are usually the ones that are in the biggest bubble, which is the blue checks. The blue checks are at most 2,000 people in Australia, at most. And they're servicing their own beliefs because they need to reassure their own realities because they've never actually been in reality. They've spent their entire life in a rich detached bubble, then they went to boutique poor land, and they feel massive anxiety due to a combination of drugs and not seeing a blade of grass because they live in the inner city, and so they sit there just being like, fuck you, you know, they're fucked up people is what I'm saying. Is the counsellors, the people that really feel, because this is the other thing as well, like the average Australian, when they see that somebody said something that's like controversial, first of all, they don't give a fuck because, again, they live in the real world. It's like when they're always like, oh, guy does Yilmaz is racist. First off, they're just looking for reasons to hate me because they ain't me. But the second one is that they didn't go to a public school, you know? They don't know those characters, but everybody that's been to a public school knows a Yilmaz and loves him. And loves him. And he's like a mascot of the public school system, that kind of kid, right? But they don't understand that because they've never been in reality. And that's what I think every time I ever see these people. It's just that their entire life is digitized. You do have to remember these things. They obviously have miserable, horrible existences. I think it really is, and this is getting into the trite hippie area, but it's true. It's just like they're reflecting the pain they feel inside. They really are. And I think that you also need to know that the average person really doesn't care. Like, I don't care that Pauline Hanson said that we had an Asian invasion in the 90s. Like, she made a funny cartoon, mad. Plus, on top of that, because I live in the real fucking world, I've been in Western suburbs parties of people being like, tell you what, the fucking Chinese are taking over. And they're legends. They're really, really much better people. The way that I always describe the people, that class of people that cancel people, right? Like, two things that I always remember. They're the losers of the elite class. The losers. The dregs. The ones, because the other ones are too busy running companies. International companies. They're sitting there going, right? They're people that just leeches of society, mooch off the people that they're looking down on because they don't understand the interlinkages of it. But the other thing that I'm always going to say about those people that like the Pauline Hanson voting types is if your car broke down, they will drive to your house and fix it for you. If you ask for a lift from these fuckheads, they go, oh, sorry, I didn't see the text. They're bad people. And it's just the same thing. It's like, it's the classic Marcus Aurelius, and I think you need to write this down because that is true wisdom. There is a man who deeply thought about life and didn't have the distractions of social media. But he came up with this gem. Marcus Aurelius, I think I've said it before, but let me just say it one more time. Why would I be concerned by the opinion of those who despise themselves? That's deep. You ever get cancelled, you ever get socially shamed, look at that. Because the people that are doing the socially shamed are doing it because they have nothing better going on in their lives. Their life is a waste. A complete and utter waste. And the fact that you got cancelled means that you're doing something with your life because you're the one getting written about, not them. I'll leave it at that. Make sure that you press like, make sure that you subscribe. If you want more pearls of wisdom like that, I've got the perfect place for you. It's called Jordan Shanks, the Patreon. Check it out. I was thinking of leaving, but then I got too lazy to do anything about it, so I'm staying there. And you could get, for the price of a coffee, all of this wisdom, double the amount of wisdom that you get here. Double the amount. It's worth it. As I've told you 1,000 times before, invest in yourself, damn it. That's what self-help is. It is an investment in yourself. Is there anything better that you could be investing in? The answer is no. The answer really is no. You really need to understand and focus on the fundamentals of life, the little mechanisms that make life work, because then you can unpack, repack. You need that stimulus in your life because other people don't have it, and then you end up just on Twitter being like, fuck you. I mean, look, I'm guilty of it as well. I've done it a lot in the past, obviously, but I'm saying for somebody my stature who does live on the internet, God, I do it infrequently. And it is because of self-help. And it's because, unlike them, self-help makes you actually aware of your foibles in life. So you are more forgiving of other people's foibles, and on top of that, you're able to work on those foibles, so you actually are infinitely better than those cancellers. Anyway, that's what I think you should do. Sign up to Jordan Shanks, like and subscribe. I will see you in the next episode. Bye.